Welcome, everybody. I'm Dave Klein for Cymulate. Welcome to our broadcast. You know, if you followed me on my weekly newscast and going over, various breaches and things that we see, if you hear me in any of my white papers or reports we've done, you know the importance of least privilege and multi-factor authentication. It is one of those primary things that today it's a fundamental thing that you should be doing no matter who you are in the world, right? And this is really kind of critical. And there's all sorts of things from the attacks, from where we are with cyber insurance and other things that are going to make this a must do if you haven't started already. And it's really kind of critical. I'm here joined today by Tim Savage of TypingDNA. How are you doing, Jim? Tim. Sorry. My God.
Don't call me late. Don't call me late for dinner.
Beginning jitters. Tim.
Yeah. Hey, Derek, I'm doing great. It's awesome. No kidding.
Yes. And if people follow me, they know I'm a little bit of an absent-minded professor at times. Yes. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself.
Well, let's see. Today I am coming live and direct from Rome, Italy. So there we go with that. And I am the senior vice president of sales for TypingDNA, and we get to authenticate the endpoint. I'm a father of one. I'm married to the most beautiful woman in the world. Her name is Sandra Savage, and I work with the most amazing team on the planet. And I get to hang out with people like you, so I'm a pretty blessed guy.
Pretty amped. I'm amped as well. I'm very much amped as well. So getting into various things, and talking about, let's start with the attackers. We have done a lot of reports at Cymulate, and it all comes back to a certain, I'd say, one hand of things. And we did a 2021 State of Cybersecurity Effectiveness report where we looked at the millions of tests that our customers do, offensive tests in their environment, day after day, and found that the number two things that were essential across the entire thing was attackers live off the land and they take advantage of the fact that we don't use least privilege, that the fact that the average user can install software, can pop a PowerShell, can attach to Active Directory and create a service account or begin a discovery session and things like that. And then beyond that is that multi-factor authentication, right? So you have them taking advantage of least privilege. And then if there's no multi-factor authentication, they're going to find the way to get in. They're going to find the password either through brute force or through reconnaissance or what have you. And they're getting in, right? And then they're going to go ahead and take advantage of that. That really those two things were kind of the things that came across that effectiveness study. We also did one on ransomware. And one of the cool findings there was the number one thing people were doing was multi-factor authentication. That beyond being a victim or not a victim, both sets felt that was the number one thing to do, even above EDR. Now, EDR should be everywhere too, by the way, but that was really kind of critical in that ransomware survey. And then we have another survey coming out at the end of the month. I'm sorry to be an advertiser in the beginning of this, but this we have, between that usage report of all those testing and the ransomware, I really wanted to know about breaches in general. And to me, and again, the survey will come out at the end of this month, end of May. So look forward to that. But the biggest thing I saw in there, beyond phishing, the number one problem as a source of breaches was the users. And the type of behavior was not clicking on a link that they were sent to them, but beyond phishing, the next thing was that user did something, whether it was innocently or not, added a software a piece to their desktop. Clicked on an online app and joined that app and didn't know what it did and stuff like that. So that was really kind of interesting. So more on that later. But for you looking at things, talk to me about the attackers and their ability to take advantage of these things.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I get to sit around and talk about this all the time because I'm at conferences, pretty much every week in different parts of the world, and people come up to me and I'll say kind of what we do, mostly going, sure, here's what we do, but to start a conversation, what are you experiencing? And just along with what you're seeing is that you're running into people who are becoming their own attackers. They're becoming their own ability to let and I explain it like this. The front door is wide open on the house, right? You've built this great system and you have all these things together. It's wonderful, but the front door is wide open. So I can basically, on most endpoints, you walk in the front door, have some chips, pour some soda on the carpet, whatever, and walk back out. So it's the attacks then are wide open. There's a million things you can do, from letting, and there's also the piece where, if you hand off your endpoint to somebody else and lets the kid do homework or whatever, you now have this very technical term called foolishness. So it means that you are making user error and false positives. But the worst part is, and when it's not a user error and false positive, but when it's a user error and now it becomes a true positive. Malware has now entered the system. Like you said, an app has been downloaded, whatever the case may be, but it happened with an 8-year-old. So now you've opened up an issue to your environment that didn't stop at that one endpoint, and now you also put yourself in a form of self-coverage from a cybersecurity insurance standpoint because you didn't authenticate the endpoint. Yeah. And there you go. So it's like all this, like doom and gloom, which makes it interesting, but makes it tough for sure.
Hold on a second here. What's going on? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm back. Can you hear me? Perfect.
We got you. All right.
The Siri came up on my screen. Right. You talked about the 9-year-old kids, and the Siri came up on the screen. I don't know if that was related to that or not. And again, there's a whole post 2020 thing that's part of this. Right. I'd argue that we are in the middle of a revolution that people will see later on, or at least an evolution, a dramatic evolution. Right. The idea is you and I have been in this business a long time. I've used my web camera forever. Right. Using WebEx back when I worked at McAfee in the early 2000s. But the truth of the matter is, it really is today. Cameras are not optional. People are working remotely. Right. It's not just us people, cyber warriors in the field who are remote. Everyone's remote. And the challenge of, like you talk about, even if it's a situation of the individual not handing off to the 7-year-old to play games after they've done work, but even themselves in having their health records open on another screen, doing a real estate transaction, or their hobby. I happen to love guitars and that kind of thing. And you're looking at guitars and things like that. The work-life balance also includes that you're working from home, you're working remotely, and you're sometimes working on machines that are not owned by the company. And even if they're owned by the company, there's things that to do, but that really is a challenge.
And I think that you think about it, you go, well, am I really going to go create another user to look at guitars? I mean, am I really going to do that? And the answer is yes, because our posture, and it's sort of like, we have to think that everybody wants to work from home. That's fine. Well, if you want to drive the car, there comes with responsibility. That means you have an endpoint that cannot be checked on ever. Now, most people that work from home before, they were high sophisticated users of an endpoint, mostly technical people. But you didn't, or like salespeople as they were out in the field. But that became the anomaly. For the most part, everybody else is in an office. And for the most part, most users have a low sophistication of how to use an endpoint. It's not that it's smart or not smart. It's just the truth. So it means that now when you have all of your endpoints and you do not have any control over them, and people are doing whatever they want with them, it means that you also have to start. We have to, as end users, have to think. And this is Dave, you and me together, right? We all have to think. I have to take precautions because I'm setting myself up to be able to be a secure end user. So and I'm the same thing. Hey, I've got my Robinhood account literally on the computer I'm working off of. And these are things I'm slowly moving into other users. So I log out of my own one user account I'm working off, and I'm going on to another. But that means also, as I'm doing that, really I have to move that to another endpoint to really be truly in the place I need to be. And that is a big paradigm shift. But as we move into 24 and 25, which seems like that's forever away, it's not. Even in 23, we're going to see cybersecurity insurance premiums and everything else start to make big pressure pushes on the financial teams of companies, and also in the operations side, let alone the CISO side of it. So as all that starts to come in, it means we're all going to have to mature. But it means that if somebody also can't stay within the confines of the maturity level and sophistication level of running your own endpoint, then you're probably going to be asked to come back at the office. Gasp.
Right. Come back to the office. Yeah, no, seriously. And by the way, they'll either be asked to come back to the office or there's many times I've done tons of incident response work where when you're done, they're setting up the virtual desktop environment for the 20 people who will never be allowed to go back to their own laptops again, right? Because there's such a risk, right? And that happens. That
It's
happens
real.
all the time. Maybe I remember a story of a financial firm, which will remain anonymous, that had 7 different cases of ransomware that I was working with in a past life. And literally, when we were done, I was, the guy next to me was making those VDI accounts, and it included several of the owners, right? And the concept was,
It's real.
This is what
It's real.
we have to do this, right? We have to do this. And the point was, even the people on that list, it made sense, right? It made sense for that case. And I think you hit on some of least privilege that I want to hold off on, about the idea of how do you do your home stuff and work stuff together at one time. Well, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I want to talk a little bit about what you were saying about the teeth that comes from insurance and things like that are coming up. Why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm not a doom and gloomer. I mean, a lot of people, especially in cybersecurity sales, it's really easy to walk in and say, "Do you know the sky's going to fall? Do you know these bad?" And so it's like, yes, I'm well aware bad things are going to happen. Got it. So I'm not a fan of going after that. I am a fan of being able to talk about things from a this is what's going on. Kind of if you're talking about sports, we want to win this season. These are things we've got to do. So there are as it's coming. So you got to think cyber insurance does not make money by signing policies. Insurance makes money by not paying out on policies, which means that they invest heavily in being able to not pay out on policies. So if you come to your insurance provider and say, "Hey, oh my gosh, this happened. We would like to submit this claim." Well, a year ago, they're signing policies, they're taking claims, they're going, "We're going to be okay." At the end of last year, they're way upside down because of cybersecurity insurance, right? So now they're going cybersecurity insurance policy providers are now getting really smart to how the endpoints work, to how the whole entire environment works, and they have hired lots of people to be able to understand that better. But your endpoints become a very easy place where something can be ingested into the system that you don't want, right? And then can be proven that it was not authenticated relative to due diligence that is enough to make the claim valid and provided. So it's kind of like if you talk about like the IRS, if they look at something, they find one thing wrong, they go the next, they go the next, they go the next. But if they don't find something wrong, they move on. Insurance, the same thing. So now you put yourself in a CISO position. You got an incident that happens. It's costing you $2 million in damages and Bitcoin and whatever else. Now you go to insurance and say, "Look, I need to get this taken care of." If it doesn't happen, that cost now goes onto the budget of the cybersecurity team, and the CISO and the CISO leadership are all now looked at by the board from that issue relative to how it hurt the budget. Now, you could be a multi-billion-dollar company, but the cybersecurity budget, $2 million, is going to whack it right between the teeth. If you're thinking of endpoint security and endpoint hygiene, it's as the user, you're now supporting your own company, but the CISO is getting that pressure. The CISO team is getting that pressure. Everybody's pushing in, and ultimately the end user is going to have to jump up in their ability. But the cybersecurity insurance providers are exponentially going to be lowering the amount of claims that they're not just going to give it up. And we have to think about that, because it's like if we're just out there, again, you want to have the keys to the car. If you go out there and you jam this car into another car, your insurance premium is going to go up. And guess what? If it goes up too far, you're not driving. That's literally it. So it's the analogy works on both sides. It's not doom and gloom. It's not like the sky is falling. We already know the sky can and probably will fall, not if but when. But the logistics of thinking it out become interesting. And as I have this conversation over and over, it's interesting to watch different leading cybersecurity people everywhere in the world, because I'm at conferences. I mean, I'm in Rome today. I was in Tel Aviv. I'm in Seattle next week. I was in Omaha. You name it. And everybody has the same reaction. They understand it. And they're not just like trying to find just like a solution. They're trying to find a continuity for everybody to come together under, because just because the cybersecurity team wants it or the finance team wants it, they still don't understand together what a solution is until something so financially taxing happens that they have to it's kind of like if you're going underwater and you need to gasp for air, you'll take anything. But when you're just kind of taking water onto the boat and you can still stand there, you're not as frantic. So it feels like we're taking water on the boat, but once a lot of people hit the water and now there's no boat left, that's when things start to get frantic, which we want to get solutions before that happens.
We want to avoid the franticness.
Right. Yeah.
You want to avoid the franticness.
Yeah.
And again, I can tell you in my career how many times I've done, incident response work. When a breach happens, the coffer is open. But for me, that's not healthy. and it's
It's not helpful either. It
not
sounds
helpful.
great when you say it. Yeah, it's not
Right.
healthy. It's going now we need your help, but we need
Right.
your help and we're dying. I'm here for that,
Right.
but it's really not a great way to do business. And you never
No.
and a lot of, and then also there's a bunch of ambulance chasers running in. So I like you stay in the mix with people. I'm here as it starts to come up. Let's talk about it. Even we're doing a small bit of support, but we don't want it to be now. You have no life right now. I'm the first to jump in the water and do whatever I can to help, but you don't want that. Even though from when you get into growing a business and having a solution, it sounds good, but it's really not as good as it's when you actually get in the middle of it.
And again, I think what's also important, we met, the title of this is Endpoint, but really also what's important here is when we talk about least privilege and multi-factor authentication, two groups of users beyond just an initial attack vector really come into play. One is the executives, and also the technical staff. And we think about, and from my background, I can tell you how many times I've logged into a Jira, and every instance, VPC instance I have, virtual private cloud instance I have, has a username and password. And if you didn't get the cert, you can download the cert right there. And fortunately, I got to say, there's another thing here. So SOC 3 compliance.
SOC 3, get ready to live. Yeah, right.
that gets rid of the your company name 123 type passwords, right? And again, by the way, the administrators say we're trying to do the best, and often they're the ones who come up with these wonderful things like the company name, date, 123, right?
Yeah.
And if Leanna I'm gonna put this up. Leanna has a great thing here. We don't want to get in that water. Correct. You don't want to get to the point where you're in the water, Leanna. I agree with you. I totally agree with you on that one. And also, we don't want to do that. And also, Rob Brewster, hello. Good to see you. Good to see you here from the Netherlands. Nice to see you.
Just south here, brother.
Yeah. And as Max says, I'm digging all these analogies. True. Amen, brother. But the key here, is you look at the executives, right? And they're the ones who could send an email message that say, send $1 million to this account. And again, this is a financial fraud. And what's amazing is, just like cybersecurity fraud, everyone can now be a victim. I have a friend who owns a retail chain, and they've been hit with this kind of pay the invoice. We've changed the account number to multinational corporations. I forgot which Shark Tank person it was, but one of the Shark Tanks had a situation where they paid an invoice to the wrong account. It was millions of dollars. They did get it back, right? They get it back. But when you think of those executives, that's huge, right?
Yeah.
And the executives are the one who want to do their own thing, right? So you have that whole thing of please do not, use your private phone. We gave you a phone because you're a risk, right? Because you're an executive. You have all sorts of rights you don't need to have. And then again, back to the idea of administrators, right? And so at least privilege, and I'm going to cover least privilege here, then we'll get into multi-factor authentication. At least privilege, you think about, even in the situation of your techie accounts, your root accounts and things like that, you got to identify the user. You have to authorize them, which means multi-factor authentication, and really know it's them. And then the key with least privilege is really lock things down. And even in places, you got to say, I come from a Fed background, the view of the unclassified network by the Defense Department was that network is had. So you say nothing in the unclassified environment that you wouldn't want your enemy to hear, right? And that was the mantra, was if you're on the unclassified network, it doesn't mean you can say whatever you want. It means everyone can hear you. And it's so open, we know we're compromised somewhere. And then the key is back to those Jira pages with the username, password, and the certificate. If you didn't have it, they have to go away, right? And you need to have all sorts of ways to do the authentication, authorization, at least privilege, even for those power users.
Something that's interesting is I'm talking to a physical security leader, and a very well-known logo, large logo. We all use it, and and I said to them, listen, you've got your PAM, but then you got like your super PAM. You got CEOs of this massive company, right? Now, these endpoints. I mean, Jason Bourne scenarios are going on for these endpoints. And the person I'm talking to, she goes, well, of course they are. Well, we kind of make up those things in our mind. Sometimes we hear about them and, you read about them and they can kind of glamorize them. But really, that endpoint has, you can sell that endpoint on the dark web for, you can get a bunch of Bitcoin for, this is definitely this person, authenticated. And if it's logged in, you just keep it logged in, cash money. And so now, when you think about those, one, it's a stash and grab, right? But two, if somebody then goes in and knows what they're going to go look for, if that's not connected to the internet, you can't brick it. So now you've got somebody in a major corporation that you have access to their machine. It puts this really weird, kind of situation in place. So we're talking with one large logo, but I then talked to somebody who's leading security here in Rome, and I explained this to them. He looked at me and went, "I'll be right back." He leaves, comes back, writes down his email address, and goes, I want that." So like he wants that security. So when we're also talking about your endpoint can get jumped on in a Starbucks for sure. But if somebody's premeditating to get into it, it's real. And anything on these are highly valuable. And you can get a Bitcoin for a bunch of screenshot pages of health records from a hospital, right? Right. Imagine if you have an endpoint that does not have least privilege on it and is dealing with a high-ranking official in a well-known brand. The value of that is extensive, especially if somebody knows what they're doing and then can wring every piece of cryptocurrency out of it. And we jest a bit, but it's so real that when people are now traveling, it's meaning that, Mark Benioff has 7 or 8 bodyguards rolling with him. And it's one, his physical security, but two, from a digital standpoint, all the things that he has access to inside of his devices means that if somebody shakes one of them off him, it might even be worth more than him as a person being actually held. And that's crazy to think of. But when you get into that doom and gloom, that Jason Bourne side, now if you go, everything you're holding is least privilege, that's a completely different story. But we know that most leading people of companies do not have least privilege, let alone your garden variety user, which means you can go in and go ham on anything that you want. But this is all part of the dialogue that will be changing over the next year to 2 years. And I said this today, which is kind of funny. You're 3 years from now, it's going to next generation. We'll say next generation because the kids these days don't know about a mouse, right? Kind of most of them. It's going to mean your endpoint is going to be attributed to only you. It means only you are going to use your endpoint, which is kind of going to be like today. You don't really use someone else's phone, but kind of. But I said this today. I thought it was kind of funny. It's going to be like wearing someone else's underwear. You're not going to wear someone else's underwear, right? But it's the same thing. You're not going to touch someone else's computer because one, you can't. Two, it's kind of a gross thing because you're not supposed to do it. That it's going to be taboo in a sense to get on someone else's computer and use it because of what it has access to, kind of like it's an external organ of the body. So I said that and I was like, that's where we need to be. And what a crazy thought if we're to think of your endpoint is an extension of you that you would never think of anybody else using, and how fun that would be for our cybersecurity listeners around the world for that to be a real thing.
So, and by the way, this goes back to what you talked about, having the screen opens, Dave's looking at guitars, right? Which is my big fetish. I have tons. And I'm crazy. I just bought another one. So literally, the point is it is becoming part of us, right? And you think about all the law cases recently that talk about your phone and self-incrimination, right? And so the idea of a phone being your privacy, being your right, being part of you, right? And it's almost like we're a cyborg already. And people talk about, Terminator and when computers gain presence and we become cyborg. The point is we're already there. We're here already, right? And you think about how much we depend on these things. It's part of it, and I think that where we're talking about multi-factor authentication, least privilege, where it is today, that next generation, right? We need to do the fundamentals first, which is least privilege and multi-factor authentication, but then eventually we're going to be having a SASE type conversation where your desktop, you own it, and everything that is your business is in a separate secure tunnel with least privilege, And then, so you can literally pop a browser and it's a different account, and you pop
Yes.
certain things as a different account versus what else. I think that's where it's going to go. It has to go.
And your logins right now to change users is clunky. And that is where I guarantee you that both Microsoft and Apple are working through quick login change. They have to, just like they change it so you can kind of use a mask when you're using your Face ID on the iPhone. That just came out. That is something I know they're working on the back end to go quick user changes. So if you are on an endpoint, you know when you're on the endpoint, you're working on these things, and then this next endpoint has different privileges, and it will be delivered as such. But it's it's where the it's where the fundamental understanding of what you have and where you can go and what you can do, which will is the change. Because right now, changing your actual profiles on your endpoint is clunkier than you would like. But at the same time, you shouldn't have your Robinhood account mixed in with the business that you're doing every day, or have them working together in any way, because you also don't realize, just if you are working for an organization that becomes high on the list of bad guys looking to get engaged with, it's if you're in a metropolitan area and somebody decides to pull out in front of your house and crack into your non-secure router and finds their way in, they might find a honeypot of business, but they can also very quickly find a honeypot of your own, and they just drive off, and you're none the wiser. Those are all, again, doom and gloom, but it's also real pieces that are coming together. So as we're segmenting our world, and what's a term that's really coming into play again, like kind of 23, is your authentication stack. So the authentication stack, TypingDNA acts as a trigger. You get rejected. Happens a bunch of times. Then it goes into the SIM, and it starts then an authentication stack. So you can get a photo to flash on you. Voice recognition is asked for. Video starts to run. Thumbprint starts to go down. But that means as you go through that authentication stack, it's going through the process of being able to make sure that it is you. And that can be for personal use, which is also a thing that will be going on, but that'll also be for your professional. But it means that stack now becomes into something that everybody's going to be aware of, and it will be normal. Oh man, I'm not, something happened on my computer. I got to give a rent, whatever. But it's what's going to go on. Sorry, hold on. But we're starting to think that way, but we're also going, what personal information do I want to give up relative to as I'm authenticating myself? And this is going to be where we're going to there'll be court cases and so forth going on how that becomes something that is relative to it. So the MFA becomes a multifactor, but then that built with least privilege puts you in a posture security-wise that, one, the company is clear, but also personally, you're understanding better as a user that this is also my own personal job. Just like we buy McAfee for our own endpoint, I've got to make sure that these computers you're using are much stronger than you think, and they are much more accessible than you think. And from that, they run into much higher amount of opportunity for negativity to happen. So once that kind of starts to settle in, and I think over the next next year or so it will, and the driver will be cybersecurity insurance is going to raise their premiums, and they're going to cut their coverage. And that's going to be, which is always kind of the driver, which means that drive safe. If you run this thing into a telephone pole, you're going to take the bus to school, son. That's what's going to happen. You know what I mean? That's what's going to go on.
And the key is when you look at other industries, and I'm another one of my, besides guitars, I'm really big in archaeology and anthropology, study of humans throughout history. And one of the things you find is throughout the world, there's no story of schools catching fire and kids dying these days, because the tragedy of that is so awful, and then insurance and the loss of life and things. And that today schools are made of fire retardant stuff. They practice lining kids up and leaving the school as fast as possible, all these kind of things. And so the key is what we're just seeing in cybersecurity is the same effect, is trying to prevent things like that from happening in the cybersecurity world. I think going to the next part here is talk about multi-factor authentication for a bit. And this is your expertise. There's many different ways of doing multi-factor authentication. In the past, it was text messages, in some cases tokens, right? And let's talk about that evolution. And again, at least adoption means you're getting rid of some risk. A great example is in the SolarWinds supply chain attack. It was stopped because someone called FireEye and said, "Hey, how you doing? I need to re-put my my endpoint on my my phone with the token, right?" And they're like, "That's not a phone that we have. That's not our." And that's actually how it was caught. That's how it was caught. And so I'm going to say, we're going to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly of multi-factor authentication. I want to talk about the differences, but also people out there is, if you at least start doing this, you'll start to see the benefit. But let's talk about the good and bad and ugly with multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, and I think that the most recent thing that I've had a conversation about that has put the midline of it is I was talking to somebody, a large financial institution in India, and they were talking to me about, hey, Tim, blah, 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 2FA doesn't really work in India anymore. It's just overrun. It doesn't have any teeth. And he went on. I went, hold on a second. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that. And one, it was a question of just, I'm on a sales call, so I really want to get, the deep dive on it, but I was also very interested to hear this. And so India has been pushing their 2FA, text messaging, anything they can come up with, and really being able to spoof or get into, or any words you want to use, which means that I can authenticate that I am a carbon-based life form, and that's about it, means that somebody can move past and gain access to, especially from a financial institution, with ease. And we've tried, we've gone through everything, even to the extent where if I go to get a 2FA from my bank, it says, here's this 2FA, we'll never call you and ask you for this, which means that at the same time, somebody else can copy a number. Somebody gets their 2FA to go through. They see that's happened. They call up and they say, hey, this is Chase Bank. What's that number? And you say the number. They beat you to the punch and you lost your account. All these things that are very doom and gloomy are building into something has to have teeth, and they run out of teeth. So as we do multi-factor authentication, it was 2FA, so you got a two-factor authentication, great. There's a lot of ways to do it. But multi-factor means multi-factor. It means we do this, and we do this, and we do this. Well, the first number one, has now started to attrition and degrade. So that thing moves out. We're now down to, we keep adding more. So it means that no matter, there is no answer, right? There is only a current solution. And that current solution keeps moving through. So you have to evolve with as anything else evolves. And it's kind of cool because I get to be in this conversation. And a lot of times I'm really coming at it from a point of interest, because I always say this, I want to be the dumbest person in the room. I want to walk in and I want to be a student of everything. And that's not hard for me. No problem. But I want to be a student of everything. So I'll go, tell me about why that is and what have you found with that? And I'll get people on the line talking about 2FA that are in MFA, they're just know everything about it. And they'll start just going off about the problems they're running into. And then you really see that this conveyor belt of trying to keep up with, well, there's a whole bunch of other groups of bad guys out there that are doing the same thing. And if you think of it like it's a bad thing, it'll get you caught up in the wrong emotions. You have to think of it like it's a game. You are playing a game with other people out there that are playing the game with you. So you go, okay, I'm not getting emotional over this and getting like bad guys, whatever. I'm going, you're the other team, and how smart are you with this? And how are we outsmarting you and building opportunities to continue outsmarting? And what you find is that as you put in processes that make both sides thinking, both sides working, and by mean both sides meaning us and it being providing the 2FA and the person who's getting it, the good guy side, thinking together, now we're running plays that put the ball in the hoop or the ball in the first down line. And that it makes a different feel. And that's what I've been able to see from people as all the classic ways to do that. Like the one ad where the robot's trying to get in and it goes pick an overpass, come on. And it's like, it's very funny, but I mean, that's like life for everyone. Pick a taxi. I already picked all the freaking taxis.
Oh, by the way,
let me in.
It's frustrating as all get out, because I can tell you how many times pick the palm trees. Like, well, does that branch go over to the other two? I'm not sure, right? And you're like, wait a minute, right? So even for us humans, it's annoying as all get out. But the key is, I think one thing is kind of important here is with the text messaging, right? The first form of multi-factor authentication most people were introduced to, right? Beyond the RSA tokens, you saw there were several reports out that the nation states have an easy time at getting to cellular carriers and ISP providers. So the concept is, it's almost as if the zeitgeist, right? The thought of the day is most nation states can get past two-factor if it's a text message. But then you think about the criminal attackers and the ransomware attackers, and they're doing things like SIM swapping, right? Calling in saying, "Hey, I got a new phone. I'm Dave Klein. And I'm Tim Savage, and I need my new card for my phone." And then they get your two-factor authentication for your phone, right? So that what we're finding is where two-factor authentication and that first line of defense, which was a text message, is better than nothing, right?
Sure.
We're starting to see the attackers adapt, which means we need to adapt too, right? And so we talk about things like tokens and stuff like that. And again, it gets to a point where you need to do other things to make it happen. Now, one thing, let's talk about biometrics, and we'll get to also behavioral heuristics. Talk to me about some of the things that other ways that we're doing authorization.
Yeah, so we're also seeing, it's interesting, the drop off after the 2FA then goes into, and I actually experienced this in a conversation with someone about a credit card where they didn't have the ID was lost, and they couldn't get through they got through the credit card, and the credit card said, "Listen, since you can't give us your ID, we have to schedule a face-to-face meeting." And the user was through the roof because, like, I just see my credit card back. So the experience gets so corrupted by the user, and they're so angry because now I just went into my account. They don't care about the security. It's out the window because now they're so frustrated with it. So when you now say, okay, well, as me, I'm at the DMV and I'm getting my license. And as I'm talking, the person who's talking to me keeps going like this. Every 5 minutes. Okay, as they're doing it. And I'm going, I said, that really has to be frustrating. Every 5 minutes, you have to put a thumb on there. Like, everybody in the DMV for the whole entire state has to do that. So you look at the user experience where somebody's like, I'll throw security out the window if I don't have to do this. So that, and then as you talk to, companies that are then providing if you especially when you're dealing with BPOs and large organizations that have users all over the world, they're now running constant video. So somebody is on camera, and sometimes they leave the camera off, but if somebody moves behind you, they now turn the camera on. And if there's somebody over your shoulder, then you're getting dinged, right? Or there's a voice recognition. So it goes through all these things that are all so frustrating for the user that they'll go, if there's any, it's kind of like if I'm driving along, as a teenager and the oil light comes on, well, I don't really want to get the oil changed. I'll just put a piece of tape over it and off you go. And the car eventually seizes up. It's where a lot of people are experiencing. So a 2FA to your phone is a bit, it's frustrating, or the new one in crypto is move the puzzle piece over the puzzle. And now, again, it's carbon-based life form. We can definitely say that, but we cannot understand that if it's the person or not. And that's where the gap starts to come in. So you can pick out a million ways to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, too, people don't want their picture taken. And if for work, okay. But even with the state of Texas suing Facebook for facial recognition or whatever. And now you're like, is that right? Is that wrong? But now you're losing your point. You're caught in a spin going, whoa. The point is not, is there too much personal information? We have to make sure that we're playing together. This is what I mean, that people providing it and the people that are using it, we then start going against each other. And that's the two players on the field that start having a fist fight and going, the other team's going, oh man, I'm so sorry you guys aren't having any teamwork. Boop. And then they start popping in so they can use that against us. And that's where, as we talk about the myriad of forms of authentication, it comes back to being able to know, how can I know that this is the person without having to have a customer experience that is super bad? But if you're having an employee experience that's bad, is it worse or is it not? Because you kind of work for us, you kind of have to do this. But then now we talk about the great, resignation and how people are being perceived. And, the great line of that, your best salesperson might be wearing a sweatshirt and you're not picking them up, right? Here I am, a sales guy in collared shirt, whole nother story for a whole nother day. But you're able to say, if somebody's not feeling it, they're like, I'm out, right? So you now deal with all of these end user frictions, and we have to burn the end user frictions and get to a security solution that everybody's able to run with, because the other team, the actual other team, is playing into that, and they're laughing all the way, literally, to the crypto bank.
Agreed. And so the key is to find ways of doing that multi-factor authentication that aren't a nuisance, but that really truly get to who the person is, right? And try to get to the person and who they are and stuff like that. And so I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to give me how you guys deal with this, because I thought that was really fascinating. And with TypingDNA, and the key is great resource on multi-factor authentication. And tell me how you guys handle that.
Well, I mean, and I'll say it this way. I'm an SVP of sales, so I want to sell everything we're doing all the time. I'm always selling. That's who I am, right? But Raul Popa, who is our CEO, took a sabbatical, and in the sabbatical, he said, "I'm going to work on how to be able to create intent." 3 days into his sabbatical, he started working on this. Him and our other co-founder, Christian, they started working on cryptography, like the actual writing. How does that work? How do we tell that apart? 5 years later, Google-backed company that has a team of people that only focus on how to be able to continuously authenticate the user, right? And doing that by the way that you type. So have the time it takes to push the key, the time it takes to get to the next key, and the difficulty in between. That is a very simplistic way to say what a lot of hard work has been done. But that's what we've been able to do. And we're led by a really strong group. Stefan is our CEO, our CTO, just unbelievable work. But I say that to go, this has been built off of the process of how we're able to make harmony inside of authentication. So continuously authenticating, you don't know it's there. We have a little app, you download it onto your computer, 1,300 words later or 2 days of typing, it's now synced with you. If you type on my computer right now, 25 words in, it's going to just log you out. User experience, super clean, everything's nice, thank you. Bob's your uncle. But with that, it's really building off of where we all want to be in the passwordless society. And we will have, like, next generation or 2 generations from now, we'll go, why would you put a password in? That doesn't even make any sense. You just start typing on your thing or whatever. But it's being able to think together on what are all the options on how we can create an authentication stack that can work together, and we can do it where it's frictionless. So in this case, my endpoint is then authenticated, and it serves it up as a log every time, every 20 seconds. It goes up and says past, time, and the application I'm on. So think of that like a ticker tape that's coming out of my machine going into the SIM. Authenticated, fail. Whoa. Why is Tim failing? Right. Bang. Right. So now a workflow goes into play, and I get a text message that you're failing on your machine. What's going on? And I go, I don't have access to my machine. Bang, brick. So that sounds crazy. You just wiped his machine. Well, I'm not supposed to have anything on the machine that I haven't saved or that is mine. So now you get back to the very beginning of our conversation, but become serious. Now, as in sales, do I really have access to all that stuff? Yes. I have stuff on here that you can go in and find stuff. You get into my Google Drive. Somebody's put a password in there. You get in my Slack. Just search password in Slack. You want to have a fun time? You're going to be sick to your stomach. Correct. They're in there, right? So now you go, oh my gosh. Okay. So now we have an option here. So as I'm talking to people, I'm evangelizing. Hey, we have a great solution. But the great part is that we're talking to people who are now starting to think this out and going, okay, if I put this across all 20,000 endpoints, now that's also going to take out all the false positives from user error, from the foolishness we talked about before of handing off the laptop. So my cybersecurity team just got 20% of their day back. Well, that's great. Right. And we're cybersecurity insurance compliant and SOC 2 or SOC 3. If your endpoint is not authenticated, guess what? You don't get that little accreditation. So all that stuff works from a business case, and all of that is great. And it brings you back to today. I'm on my endpoint. I'm authentic. I'm one of a limited number of computers in the world that, Dave, if I pick up your computer, walk away, I do whatever I want on it. You know what I'm saying? If it's not connected, if it's air gapped, you got nothing. I can do whatever I want. But you can only type 25 words on mine. So one, it's a great sales pitch. It's the best sales pitch in the place. People shake my hand and go, you guys have created something that's amazing. I haven't created anything. You got to go call Raul and Christian and talk about things. But I go, thank you. But with that, it really means that I go, that is great, but let's evangelize how we're going to get to a passwordless world, which all leaders in anything tech wants to get there. How do we do that together? How do we think of ways to do that positively so we're all working together? And that's where I started saying with others like authentication stack. So I can go, hey, we've got this, and this is cool. You put the front door on the house. Now, okay, we've closed the door. There's a keyhole left. Now, if something's banging through that keyhole, and I say this all the time, Dave, I go, if you know what's coming through that keyhole, go call Cymulate, tell them what the vector is, and tell them what the breach scenario is, and go train on it. and go get yourself ready so you could simulate it. Now you can go back after it, right? And if you're going to go make some moves because now you're seeing something happen, go holler at net abstraction. They got a 5x obfuscation, right? All those things are great. Have a blast. You got to know what you need.
And you hit upon it. I mean, the key is that there's a need to do this in a way that isn't obstruction, right, to the end user. That's seamless.
Yes.
That truly understands who the person is, and it really comes down to also getting time back in cybersecurity, right? The idea of whatever you do, automates the difficult parts to make it easier for people. And as Liana said earlier, we talk about, usually when things happen is when they're in the water and you're drowning, right? We don't want to get in the water, and she's totally correct. The idea is with the kind of things that Cymulate does with breach attack simulation, done in a continuous security validation manner, that includes things like attack surface management. You talked about, stolen accounts. Hey, we have accounts for exchange for the executive at the to various vulnerabilities and gaps in your security stack. The idea of being able to test in a defensive fashion, like Cymulate does, is going to test as the million test study we had showed. It's going to find those gaps. It's going to find the fact where there isn't multi-factor authentication, there isn't least privilege, and then wait a minute, we were able to use this service account to go ahead and get an Active Directory. We're able to use an end user account with EDR enabled and still be able to load software and PowerShell that we included stuff that caused them to get infected. And the key is to avoid yourself going into that water. Just as we talked about insurance and liability changing things in other industries in the past, and will change things in this industry. The fact is, you get behind the wheel of a car, it's been crash tested a million times, right? Before you got behind the wheel. When you are using, tools and stuff like that, they've tested them for breakage that would cause problems with your eyes or other things or damage. Materials being tested to see if they're safe. This is just doing the same thing here. And again, just like we talked about multi-factor authentication, it's done in a manner that is easy for everyone to adopt, right? It's not like just the elite can do this, right? It's not just the elite, everyone can adopt it. And that's the kind of thing that's really important. And that's actually why you're here today, is because that study, people were like, this is the number one thing, least privilege and multi-factor authentication and stuff like that. And that's why it's really kind of effective and been appropriate. Going to the field, I see we have a question from Jonathan asking about the million test study, which is our effective use cybersecurity effective usage report. And someone asked, and also asking about the ransomware study. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat window. Send that to you here, so you can see that here. Those are the two links that you can get those two reports and take a look at them. Great question. But it's been great talking to you today, Tim. This is awesome. And again, you and I are very similar. I think that even though you're in Italy, you probably had 5 espressos already. Yeah. Best food in the world in Italy, and best coffee and espressos.
Yeah, there's espresso everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. I think we're both highly energized. I think we're definitely come back into another podcast together. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. You want to give us some takeaways before we leave?
Yeah, I think that main thing is we're a great cybersecurity community, and podcasts like this are stoke the fire of friendship and availability. We're all on the same team at the end of the day, and just because we're competing for the same budget at times, it does mean that we can share what we're able to do together. So I really appreciate this podcast and webcasts and so forth. That being able to do more like this brings it together, and so I'm just really thankful to get to be on here, and really thankful I get to work for a company that is doing major good and gives me the chance to talk ad nauseum about something that I really like to talk about. So it's cool.
Me too. It was awesome. As Max says here, great webinar. Thanks, Max. We've had a great time. I've really enjoyed this. Everyone, thank you so much. This has been the Cymulate cybersecurity broadcast. We've had a great time here. Tim, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone.